So, welcome back to the Defiant Spirit podcast and the Defy Your Number Enneagram System. I'm Baruch Levy, also known as B, and I appreciate you tuning in as always. I want to share with you what I've been doing for the past, I don't know, week, 10 days or so while I've had COVID, which was fun. Really kind of knocked me out, but not so much that I couldn't fill my time, at least the parts that I could sit up and think clearly with some, I don't know, constructive work. Now, it's part of my challenge, I guess, as an Enneagram 8 to defy that need to produce, but I didn't do such a good job of defying that and instead put my free moments and time to work by watching movies. Not just any movies, but I was really looking for movies to bring to life each Enneagram type. So, a movie that gives life to the 9 different types. And I found I definitely didn't get all through all 9, but I did find some real winners. Most of them from my treasure chest over the years of using movies to teach never on the Enneagram, and now I'm using it for the Enneagram. So I'm sure everybody at this point knows, but the Enneagram is an ancient energetic system. We might call it a personality typing system. 9 basic energies or ways we move through the world, 9 personality types. I have my feelings about that term and sort of limiting what this great system is to that, but it's how we talk, so we need to communicate. So 9 types. And each type has a different flavor, feel, movement. You don't change your type. I've really come to just believe that, we are our wiring, we are our type, or at least that's how we're built. It doesn't mean that's how we have to live. It doesn't mean it's how we have to respond. And that's the work that I do, bringing the work of Viktor Frankl to defy your number. Viktor Frankl would say, take responsibility, the ability to stop reacting to your circumstances, or in this case, your number, and start responding. And so I want to share with you today Enneagram 7, The Enthusiast. And the movie, if you haven't seen it, you've had like 20 plus years to see it. So really can't say there are any spoiler alerts here. And I had forgotten about it, but the movie Big Fish, if you haven't seen Big Fish, came out in 2003, so 20 years ago, and it has an all-star cast. I forgot how many, like maybe they weren't that famous then. They're famous now, like almost everyone. Ewan McGregor, Albert Finney, Helen Bonham Carter, Billy Crudup, Jessica Lange, Danny DeVito, Steve Buscemi. I think Miley Cyrus was in it. I mean, like it was pretty crazy how many people are in it. But it's, to me, a quintessential Enneagram 7 caricature. I oftentimes use these podcasts and talk about things as caricatures. The last one I did, if you didn't listen to it, the previous podcast, Valentine's Day, the gifts that each type likes to receive, a caricature. There's not 9 types. There's 27 types because there's subtypes, and then there's wings and there's lines. So you're talking about, and then stack, you have all 9 types in you. So, you stack them in a particular order. And if you do a test with me, I'll get you your stacking. So there's like thousands and thousands of combinations and nuances, but we need stereotypes. Sorry, I know it's not a popular thing to say. It depends what we do with stereotypes. Do we use them to navigate the world, to orient ourselves, and then to make room for nuance and individuality? So the stereotype of a 7, the enthusiast, oftentimes, no, not most often, almost always, is true to varying degrees. So if you know a 7, or if you are a 7, you'll add to it. You'll pronounce this a little more. You'll discount that a little less. But I refuse to stay away from these sort of generalizations or stereotypes, because I think they're very helpful in learning a system and making it stick and really understanding the vibe. So as we go through this, it is a stereotype of the 7s, and all those nuances need to be applied, but nonetheless, it's true. And I guess that takes us into Big Fish. Well, also, one last thing. Why am I using movies? So in my program, Defy Your Number, which you can buy online, go to defiantspirit.org, go to the Defy Your Number program, and I have all 9 types. You buy one of those types, and if you know your type, you just buy that one. And it is thorough. It's deep, it's engaging, but it's also light and fun. And I'll just share with you a page from this is the movie Big Fish, obviously, Enneagram 7 Enthusiast. But I want to share with you the movie page. I'm giving this to you for free. It's a bonus in the program. There's lots of this stuff in my program. So I have a Name That 7 for each type. I have a Name That particular type. And I have famous TV 7s and famous big screen 7s. I don't think Big Fish is on here. So you know what? I created this program. I didn't even think about it. I was trying to figure out what movies do I watch, and I could just go to my own damn program. But you can too. So jump over there. If you're not ready to buy the program, then get the free ebook that'll give you 9 types, sort of a snapshot of each type. Okay. So I'm happy to send you this slide too if you want this picture. Happy to give this away. Going back to Big Fish. So this is a movie. Why is this a 7 movie? First of all, it came to me because I was counseling somebody about their dad. And this is a grown adult I was counseling whose father is, evening of life, well into beyond the afternoon of life, probably transitioning from this world to the next soon. And he and his dad have always had a struggle-filled life because his dad was a 7. Never took the test with me, but working with him over the past few years, it's become pretty clear that his dad's a 7, and he's not. He's a 1. He's a 1. Now, Enneagram 1 and Enneagram 7 are worlds apart. If you're listening to this podcast, I always forget some people are listening, some people are watching, so you can get that slide for me. Just email me and I'm happy to send it to you. So if you are looking at this, you will see the 7 and the 1 behind me are in some ways yin or yang. When you see the line between numbers, they're yin yang. They need each other. They need the energy of what the other has to offer, but usually they're opposite sides of the spectrum. And so it's hard to traverse that line. And yet people show up in our lives to, I believe, help us develop these, energies, and in this case, the Enneagram. Why is it that we only think of soulmates as people who we get along with? Maybe the soulmates are the people who kick our ass or pain in the ass, who we don't like. They're probably more likely than not the real soulmates to challenge us. People like to forget that part of the Bible when they quote it. Adam's partner is an Ezer Kenegdo. It's called a helpmate, which I have no idea what that means. But Hebrew, Ezer means to nurture, and Kenegdo means, well, to kick you in the ass. So people, are complicated. We're complicated, and they show up in our lives to challenge us. Well, this man's father challenged him, and he never understood him. Because as he described him, and this is how I got to Big Fish, I was thinking of the movie. I was thinking, what's this movie? I just remember watching it like 20 years ago. And it was Big Fish. And I found it. And then I shared it with him. And I think it was an aha for him. And hopefully it'll be an aha for you. Regardless of whether it's your dad or whether it's your spouse or whether it's your child or a friend, we all know 7s. They're prominent. Sometimes you just won't know a 5, the investigator. Or a 4, the individualist. I think they're a little more rare. But 7s, you can't be in this society we live in today without knowing 7s. They dominate in certain spaces and places, like especially the corporate sector. If you run into a salesperson, they're quite likely a 7, probably a 3 or 7. So you really know a 7. They're remarkable, right? You remark upon them one way or the other. Now, 7s are known for many things. The Enthusiast is known for many things, not the least of which is, and this movie is built around tall tales. So they tend to have a larger than life persona or personality. Oftentimes they're big in stature, not always. I know some slight 7s, but there's just a big quality. Even if they're slight in build, they still come off as a bigger energy, and they're just big energy. That's a presence, and you just know when you're in their presence. Now, you can be an Enneagram 9, the peacemaker, and you could be a 300-pound linebacker. And if you're a 9, you might go unseen. And if you're a 5'2", small little 80-year-old seven, you're probably still going to have your presence felt. So it's an energetic thing, and they take up space. They like to, and that's what a tall tale is. A tall tale in this movie revolves around a son who just discounts his dad to the point where he hates his dad, at least for a period of the movie, because his dad tells tall tales. That's a lot of T's. And his whole life is about tall tales. And the son probably is a six, much, the loyalist, but more of a skeptic. I think he's an investigative journalist. He's a writer, but a reporter. So there's much more a factual approach to life. Maybe he's a one. One, again, is the exact opposite of the seven. Much more precision and, sort of not moving outside the lines, coloring outside the lines, being very proper, whereas sevens can be very improper, sort of push the boundaries. Well, anyways, the son just struggles because his dad is beyond reach. And everybody loves his dad except, well, his son. Although his son does love him, he just struggles with him. And the whole movie is about trying to pin down the seven, his dad, but he can't pin him down. If you ever read the book or saw the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, there's lots of these types where they just live in fantasy. One of the characters in my program that I think I talk about him elsewhere, is Peter Pan. Peter Pan is a seven character. It's hard to catch Peter. He's always on the move. He's flying around, flits and flies, and he's here and he's there. He's always sort of anticipating what's next, moving forward into the future, and as a character, doesn't want to grow up. Wants to live in Never Never Land with the Lost Boys. Sevens, reactive, not doing the work, tend towards the Peter Pan syndrome, tend towards this sort of big fish fantasy. Lots of fantasy, lots of imagination. They are the most creative type. Sevens and fours, the individuals, but sevens, I'd say, are the most creative type. I consult with a media company, and they're just filled with sevens. Lots of twos, nines, and sevens, and fours. But sevens, they just gravitate towards imagination and anything that can really engage their imagination. And they have a hard time with responsibility. It just doesn't come naturally. There's a subtype, social, that gravitates towards responsibility, but at large, sevens really grapple with responsibility. And that just means commitment, right? Committing to one plan of action. When I've worked with sevens, professionally, in some of the startups I've been involved with, there's almost always been a seven. And we've gotten into trouble when we follow the sevens flights of fancy. Is that the word? Is that the term? Because it's sort of the shiny object, and you need a 6 or a 5 to poke holes, to challenge, to ground down, and to hold us accountable. Well, sevens have a hard time, if they're not doing the work, with accountability and responsibility, and you see this throughout the movie. In fact, it's interesting. The entire movie revolves around the father and his wedding, his ring, because it symbolizes commitment. And this is a man who really was committed. He was faithful on every level of what that means to his wife, his son, his family. But it didn't feel that way to the son because he couldn't catch Peter. He couldn't pin him down. And he grew just exasperated by the big energy and the big fish, tall tales. And it's just such an amazing story because every tale that the father told was true. And some of it actually happened. I love that saying. I was told to say that when I'm, speaking as a rabbi or clergy. Everything I say here is true, and some of it actually happened, right? Because truth transcends facts. Now, we can get ourselves into some serious trouble with that line of reasoning, but it is true. Because none of us tell our stories as truth. What you mean by that is factual true. I don't care how close you get to recalling history, you're interpreting the facts as they occurred. That's how we survive. It's what we do. We are storytelling beings. That is how our brain is wired. Lots of research on this. That's why the greatest texts throughout history are story. You think of Odysseus, you think of the Bible, you think of these stories that have withstood the test of time. They're not just factual. And the factual parts, let's say, of the Bible are almost like gloss over because you can't even focus on those depths of Leviticus. Everybody knows Exodus, right? Because it's a narrative of Moses and the Israelites, etc., or Genesis, all those stories. Thousands and thousands of years, you can pass down stories. You really can't pass down facts, not indefinitely, and certainly not factually, because we all play telephone, weaving a tale. Well, this is just Seven's sort of go-to. They are storytellers. They're great storytellers, but they also tell a story by the way they piece their facts together. And so you can see the seven piece of this man makes sense of the world through narrative, which drives like a five crazy. Fives are the opposite. Fives do like the facts. Ones do like the facts. Sevens get bored really quickly. If you're ever going to present to a seven, don't do a PowerPoint. My partner in Wealth 360, Michael Feiner, talks about how he used to take fives and seven, or he used to present his, wealth management stuff to his fives and the sevens the same way. And now what does he do? He presents that factual PowerPoint to the fives, and he usually engages the sevens in experience, golfing or dinner or a baseball game. And then they'll probably talk about the finances, but through a narrative. So sevens are narrative people. They need a story. They always are grounded in a truth, right? So it isn't, when we say fantasy, we tend to think of fantasy as fake, false. But again, everything I say is true and some of it actually happened. There's a great Kabbalistic teaching. It's stuck with me for 25 years now. The saying goes like this: what is truer than the truth? The story we tell about the truth. And that's the point. The story we tell about our, air quotes, truth is the truth. And that's our truth. And so once this boy, Billy Crudup, who's a man at this point in the movie, understands this, and then as his father's leaving this world, he starts to appreciate the truth behind the stories. And with such a great, maybe this is a little spoiler alert, but too bad. You've had 20 years, or you can turn it off and come back to this, is that as his dad is dying, you see all the characters of all these different stories that he's woven together in real time, and at the end of his life. And there's elements of truth to each one. I'm thinking of the, like they were Siamese twin women in the movie. They were like literally physically connected. And, it was like this farcical vision of these women that, just wasn't true. But then at the end, at the funeral, these two sisters are twins and they show up. They're not Siamese joined at the hip like they were in the movie, but they do exist, and they existed in the story. And you discount some of the narrative and get back to, there's elements of truth here. So that's a part of it. And not writing off the seven's fantasies, not writing off the seven, not writing off the stories as fake, false news, to use a popular term, but complicated news. And our job is both to accept that seven energy, that seven narrative, but also to hold them accountable. For sevens, they really need to grow up, to take responsibility, and to not need that fantasy to keep them captivated, not need the excitement, and know that their story is worthy even if it's not embellished, right? To get back to, all people deal with this good enough thing, and sevens deal with it by making things bigger, because mundane, ordinary is very hard for a seven, and that has to be good enough. Life is lived in the ordinary. When I used to do funerals and eulogies as a rabbi, it was the ordinary moments that people really wanted to talk about. Yeah, they caught the baseball at the World Series, and created a cure to cancer, but Mom used to bake me cookies, and I just remember coming home and smelling those chocolate chip cookies, and we'd play Scrabble. Like, ordinary is not ordinary, it's extraordinary. And sevens need to get back to the ordinary is the extraordinary. And that's good enough. And that you don't have to be sort of that special, tall tale, wow, charismatic, and you can stay put in the moment, in the present, deal with the mundane. And that needs to be exciting, not to jump to the next thing. So that's the work of a seven. It isn't to let them off the hook and say, just tell your tall tales. And it isn't to say that they shouldn't tell participate in sharing their narrative. Each one has work to do in this movie. And everything they say is true, right? And so listening to the truth, not just in sevens, but the people around us, like what are they really saying by telling us this story? Here's an example. My grandfather of blessed memory, Jack Brody, was not an Enneagram 7. I think he was a 1, which probably makes this even more interesting because he told tall tales. And one tall tale that he told, I gotta stop saying these stupid T's, is, he grew up at a time before driver's licenses were a thing. You had cars, but you didn't need to get a license. He grew up in Centerville, Iowa, and he just grew up driving a car, sort of farm country, certainly back then. And he tells the tale. He told it like 50 times the same story, which is partially what this man does in the movie. And I remember this movie helping me understand my grandfather when he was alive, because I was a typical grandchild who's like, yeah, Gramps. Like, I heard this story 50 times. That's not the point. He needs to tell the story, and I need to hear the story, and it's never the same story. My grandfather would tell the story of driving his parents from Centerville, Iowa, where they lived, to St. Louis, where the rest of his family was. I don't know, what is that, it was like a 3-hour drive or something. He would tell it, and the first time he told it, he was probably like 16, like a normal kind of a driving age. And then the next time he told it, he was like, I was 13 years old and then like the 50th time, I was 5 years old and I couldn't even reach the pedals, and I'd have to put down, I don't know, phone books to sit up and a stick to push the gas. And, it just got bigger and more big fished. And I, again, was like Billy Crudup in the movie. I was almost not just dismissive. I ejected the story as false. You weren't 5, Grandpa. Like, you were not able to drive a car. And then as I grew up, I don't even think he was alive when I started to really unpack these stories that he told me. And this was just one of many. It started to occur to me that there was truth in what he was saying, A. And B, there was a moral, there was a nugget, a wisdom in there. And he was framing it in a tall tale. And as I really, just as an example, as I started to unpack this, I realized he was telling me about responsibility. And as a 1, he really was always extremely responsible. And I think what he was saying was, I don't know, I was probably being an idiot teenager, take responsibility. And I and my generation, speaking from my grandfather's perspective, the greatest generation, they took responsibility. I mean, they had their own struggles. I will not wax poetic and make the greatest generation into the perfect generation, because there's a shadow side to what I'm about to tell you, but they took responsibility in a way that my generation didn't have to, partially because he did it. He was drafted into World War II. He put his life on the line. He, saw hell, the horrors of World War II, and he saw action, and he came back and he settled down and he had a family by the time maybe I was in college, I think, guess when he told me, when I was just, getting drunk and having a good time. So it doesn't say what I was doing was wrong, but he was trying to teach me something. And I think sevens do this through the way they move energetically through the world. They're trying to convey something that they know, and they do know. They're visionaries. They are really remarkable, inspiring people, and we need to pay attention to what they have to say. We need to see through the some of the facts that get in the way and see the narrative, the story, the truth, and to appreciate that. And we also need to hold them accountable, or if you're a 7, to hold yourself accountable and not become Peter Pan, not live in La La Land, Never Land, or whatever it's called, and really take responsibility for your life. Lastly, I guess I'm weaving two different movies together. Peter Pan has a transformative moment. And do you remember when that moment is? I'm waiting for your response. YouTube it. It's Peter Pan goes to Wendy's bedroom, and Wendy's the grown up, even if she's, I think, his same age, biologically supposed to be in the story, but she's a mature figure. I think she's a 2 for all of you 2s, the helper, and she helps Peter because he's wrestling with his shadow while he's in her bedroom, and she wakes her up, and she says, "What are you doing?" And he catches his shadow, and he's like, "My shadow got away from me," and he's trying to stick it back on, and she's like something like, "Silly, you can't stick it on." And from what I remember, she sews it on to his body, the shadow. Well, the shadow is the work of a 7, to take on the darker stuff, the more difficult stuff, to take responsibility, to be in the present moment and deal with suffering. 7s run from suffering. That's oftentimes what drives them. They're, in some ways, Peter Pan trying not to face life's difficult realities and stay ahead of it and outrun the shadow, but you can't outrun the shadow. The shadow is always there, and when we can sew our shadow on, own it, we can truly experience all that life has to offer, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, and not have to live our lives trying to live in Never Land and not growing up. So this is a great, great movie. It's a long movie. You think this is a long podcast? It's a long movie, but well worth your time if you are a 7, if you have 7s in your life, if you want to understand, if I described your grandma, your grandpa, your parents, somebody in your life who you've really struggled with, sounds like a 7, this movie will, or even if they don't sound like a 7, this movie will really help you appreciate them in a much deeper way. So that is my Enneagram 7 movie of the week or month. I don't know how often I'll get back to 7. I'm going to be doing more movies, interspersing them with the rest of the podcasts that I'm doing. I welcome your suggestion on movies. Please shoot me an email, b@defiantspirit.org. Would love to hear from you, or put it into the YouTube notes or wherever you're watching this or listening, and we will explore movies together. It's a great way to learn the Enneagram. Jump over to defiantspirit.org. Check out the 9 Types Walk Into the Bar, my free ebook. Check out the Defy Your Number program. And until the next time, you know what to do. Defy your number and live your spirit.